Good evening. Hey, I want to say thank you for the time already this morning. Thank you for those that I got to spend Sunday school time with, and then our worship service. Also, I know you don't know a lot about me, but I do want to say thank you for lunch because I like to eat. And so thank you very much for that. Something else that I like to do, and maybe many of you like to do this too, I like to go to car shows. I like to look at old cars and restored cars. One of the car shows I've been to many times is the Magic Dragon there at Osage Beach. And, just neat to see all those things. And it's not just a guy thing, as far as going to car shows. But the reason I like car shows is I like history. I like nostalgia. I'm a Conklin, so I like to collect things. I like to see what people can do as far as restoring, because I know I do not have that ability as great as they do. I even like to just look at pictures of cars and just dream that, wow, wouldn't it be great to have, this certain car? Because I know it's just going to be a dream. But, that idea that people have that it's only a guy thing as far as cars and car shows. And I think where that comes from is, ladies, you know this, we're not real complicated, us guys. There's only about two things that we have in our identity, and that is our job and the cars we drive. That's about as complicated as we get. But there's just, I don't think anything that is more American than the muscle car. And the definition of a muscle car, a lot of people have different definitions. Basically, it's a V8 two-door. Some say it's cars from the late 40s to the early 70s, however. But I'm going to have a little audience participation here. So, it's been a long day for you and got a week to prepare for. So let me have you help me out here. I'm going to name a manufacturer, and you tell me what muscle cars they came up with. So first is Chrysler. What did they have? I knew that happened sometime. So I heard Charger, and there's Barracuda, and Roadrunner. How about Ford?
Mustang.
Okay. And
They don't have
it. How about General Motors?
Camaro. SS.
Olds 442, Firebird. How about American Motors? See, I was waiting for somebody to say the Pacer. But yeah, the AMX and the Javelin. Our two older brothers had muscle cars, Impala Super Sport, Olds 442, Chevelle Malibu Super Sport. But the ultimate muscle car is Pontiac GTO. There ought to be a national holiday for the birthday of the person who created the Pontiac GTO. We have all these other holidays. There ought to be a holiday for the creator of the GTO. Our brother Dean had a 67 black GTO. And one time, Norm and I, we took his car out for a ride. And I won't tell you the story why we took it out. But man, it was so cool to be in that car, to drive around, or I was riding, I wasn't old enough to drive. But just to be in that car. But isn't it amazing what makes us feel cool? Isn't it amazing what we need to make us feel like we're someone, that we're someone special? It's been many years now that my daughter Eden, when she was elementary age, we were in Rolla, Missouri, and I'm driving around in a 1969 Corvette Stingray convertible. My daughter's there with me, and we're driving around town. We get to an intersection on Highway 63, and there's multiple lanes, and we're stopped there because of traffic light. And my daughter turns and looks at me. She said, "Dad, you think people are looking at us?" And I said, "If you were them, would you be looking at us?" She said, "Yeah." And so, isn't it amazing? What makes us feel like we're somebody? Have you ever thought about how much time we spend or you spend just for the purpose of trying to impress people? Trying to make you feel like you're somebody special in a crowd? Because we want to fit in. We want to look good to others. We want the approval of others. We want to be someone special. So what makes us special? What do we need to do? Or maybe let me ask, who are we? If we're wanting to talk about being special, who are we? Well, the Apostle Peter posed a similar question to that question, who are we? And it's in 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 9. And he gives us the answer of who we are. And here's what he had to say. 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 9 says, "But you are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession, that you may declare the praises of him who called you out of darkness into his wonderful, marvelous light." Did you hear the definition? Who are we? Man, we're chosen. We're royalty. We're priestly. We're holy. We are one of God's own. That tells me I'm somebody. I'm somebody. I am someone special because God made me special. God has chosen me. God has made us also to reflect his character, to reflect his qualities. Think about it. We are to reflect those qualities of love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, faithfulness, and self-control. Because those are the qualities of God. And those qualities are within us. You are somebody, and we are to reflect the quality and the characteristics of God. You are someone special because you have been wonderfully and magnificently made by God. Now, anybody remember back when Jesse Jackson read the poem, "I Am Somebody," on Sesame Street? 1971, Jesse Jackson did a little story. And as "I am somebody," and how it ended, he says, "I am somebody because I am God's child." We're God's children. We are special. I am somebody because God says I'm somebody. I am somebody special because God created me. But the devil wants to make you think that you're a nobody. The devil wants to make you think that you are useless and that you do not have a purpose. See, the devil's job is to make you doubt yourself. See, he loves to make God's people feel less than what we really are and to confuse us. Because isn't that what he did with Adam and Eve? He confused them to make them think that they weren't as special as they really were. In Genesis chapter 3, the devil came up to Eve and said, "Wouldn't it be great to be like God? To be able to know good from bad, evil to things that are right? Wouldn't it be great to be like God?" But see, what he was doing, he wasn't really talking about being like God. He was just creating this idea of making Eve think that she was a nobody, that she was useless. And so she felt that she needed to be like God to be, fulfilled in her life. But the bizarre thing is, God created her perfect. And she was in a perfect paradise. Now, think about it. Adam and Eve got to walk with God in the garden. You know, Adam and Eve were given dominion over what God created. Sounds to me like Adam and Eve had a pretty good deal. But Satan brought in that confusion. You know, I look at it that God had already gone out of his way to show Adam and Eve that out of all of creation, they were special. That they were somebody, because they were made in the image of God. But you know, God has gone out of his way to show us that we are special. And that we are somebody and that we have a purpose in life. Think about it. Out of all the ways that God could have created us, why did he create us in his image? Why like him? Because he loves us and he wants a relationship with us. What an honor to be made in the image of God by God himself. And he has given each of us the ability to think, to choose, to love, to create, to imagine, to grow. You know, the scripture says that we are God's handiwork. Another way of putting that is we are God's masterpiece. We are special. Now, I brought a little prop with me this evening. I have 1 liter bottle of 7-Up. Now, if I took the label off of this bottle, does it stop being a 7-Up? No. What if I stuck another soda company's label on this bottle? Would it stop being a 7-Up? No. What if I poured this in a Pepsi glass or a Coke glass? Does it stop being a 7-Up? No. Why do we say that no, that doesn't change it? Because the 7-Up is what's on the inside. Think about what's on the inside of you. God's Spirit. That's why we can have that reflecting character of love, joy, peace, patience, all that, because God's Spirit is inside of us. We are God's child. Sometimes the devil makes us feel like we're useless and that we can't accomplish anything. Ever feel like that? Ever had that come across your mind? And the world says you have to be all these things to be somebody special. You have to be wealthy and glamorous and wear expensive clothes and have a big house and, you know, multiple cars. And we fall for that, don't we? We fall for what the world says is that makes you special, that makes you somebody. And we'll even change things about ourselves to please people so that we feel like, you know, we can fit in or that we are special. I think about, as far as that idea of changing things about us, I think about junior high week of church camp. During, you know, the beginning of the week, junior high boys hang around with junior high boys and they play basketball and they do all this stuff. But by the end of the week, their eyes start seeing, hey, there's girls around here. And then, you know, close to the last day, yeah, and usually it's hot at camp, and so the various activities. In the afternoon, there's, you know, recreation, sports activities, maybe go to the pool, and then it's time to clean up for supper. And it's so fun to watch junior high boys as they're primping in front of a, you know, mirror. And they start putting on cologne that would stop a charging rhino. Now, why are they doing this? Because a girl has said something to them. And we understand. And I'm not here to beat up junior high boys. I've been there. But as adults, we do the same thing. You know, I once bought an impractical car just because I thought it'd be cool. I had a Triumph GT6. little two-seater British car. Had a lot of fun, but it was a stupid, expensive choice because manufacturers in Britain don't understand that as Americans, we live in our cars. You know, they're a part of us. And, you know, it was a stupid choice. But I thought it would be so cool to have this car. I remember there was this one girl who liked one of my brothers, and I won't say which one. But my brother was not interested in her. And just to be ornery, one time this girl came to school. She had her hair fixed different and had her makeup different. And some brother said, watch this. He went up to this girl and said, I really like the way you got your hair. I really like that. You know what happened? She had her hair like that and her makeup like that for a long time because she thought, hey, I am now somebody special. But we've all had those experiences that we've done just stupid things to try to fit in. And the idea is to impress people so that somehow we would be somebody special. Listen, because of Jesus, you are somebody. You are someone special. Because of Jesus, we are the church. And as the church, we are the called out of God. We are the chosen by Jesus Christ. We are the sign and the symbol of Christ's presence within this world. He has called us. He has called us out of confusion. He has called us out of sorrow and sin. He has called us out of despair and emptiness. He has called us out of nothingness and called us into the light of His mercy and into the light of His love. You are somebody. You are God's somebody because God says that you are His person. And we have been called to live and to love and to serve in God's name. That's who we are and why we are here. Now, let me make a little side note here. If we realize that we are God's people, we are God's chosen people, then why do we settle for less? Why do we settle for less when we know what the possibilities are within our lives? Why do we settle for mediocrity? Why do we settle for mediocrity in our lives, in our walk with the Lord? Why do we as a church settle for mediocrity when we know, as we talked about this morning, man, we've got a God who wows us, who does all these things, but we settle for mediocrity? You know what the definition of mediocrity, it comes from the Latin. It means halfway up the mountain. Who celebrates being halfway up the mountain? No one. But why do we live our lives like that is a cool thing? Back in 1982, I remember when this hit the news. There was a guy named Larry Walters. It was July 2nd, 1982. And he has this bright idea. He wants to fly. And so he gets a lawn chair and 30 weather balloons and some sandwiches and a 6-pack of beer and a handheld CB and a pellet gun. And he seat belts himself in this lawn chair, and he has these weather balloons tethered to his Jeep and has his friends there to help him. And so when he's ready, they cut the ropes so that the weather balloons will take him up in this lawn chair. He didn't understand how fast he was going to go up in the air. It shot him up. He went 2 miles up in the air. And he floated into the Long Beach International Airport approach. So can you imagine being a pilot and you see this guy in a lawn chair? He was so scared, so he shot, his pellet gun shot the balloons till he came down. He was arrested for doing that. But he was asked, would you ever do that again? And his answer was, not in a million years. So they said, well, why did you do it the first time anyway? And his answer was, you just can't sit there, can you? You got to be doing something. Why do we settle for mediocrity as God's children? Why do we feel that we're not good enough? Why do we feel like this life is not an adventure? It really is. Just think what each day God has in store for us if we are faithful to Him. It is an adventure. And when the scripture says that we are a chosen people, God is saying, you're my chosen people, and I'm calling you by name. Now, that's not like playing kickball in elementary school. When you played kickball at recess, and you chose up teams, you never wanted to be the last person chosen because that meant you're the worst. God doesn't do it that way. He calls you by name. He says, I want you with me. He says, you're mine. You're on my side. And faith, living our faith in God, is doing what is right, even though we don't know how God's going to work out all this stuff, but that's okay. God's in charge. And so we just live by faith. And sometimes, life is tough. But we know we're on God's team. And He's going to take care of us. There's a guy named Tommy Dorsey. He was born in Georgia. His father was a Baptist preacher. His mom was a piano teacher. Tommy Dorsey later was known as the father of black gospel music. And let me read his actual words that he had as a pivotal time in his life. He said, back in 1932, I was 32 years old and fairly new husband. My wife, Nettie, and I were living in an apartment on the south side of Chicago. One hot August afternoon, I had to go to St. Louis, where I was to be the featured soloist at a large revival meeting. I didn't want to go because Nettie was just the last month of pregnancy with our first child, but a lot of people were expecting me in St. Louis. He goes on, he says, in the steaming St. Louis heat, and if you've ever been in St. Louis in the summertime, you know what that is about. Said the crowd called on me to sing again and again, and when I finally sat down, a messenger boy ran up with a Western Union telegram. He said, I ripped open the envelope and pasted on the yellow sheet were the words, your wife just died. So when I got back to Chicago, I learned that Nettie had given birth to a boy. He said, my emotions swung from grief to joy, yet that night, the baby boy died. He said, I buried Nettie and our little boy together in the same casket, and then I fell apart. And just to paraphrase the rest of his story here, he said he bounced back and forth of, why is God so, full of injustice? Why have I been serving the Lord and then all this happens? Maybe I ought to just go back on the jazz circuit and just forget serving the Lord. But then the grief would kind of have him, hey, God's still God, and I need God to help me through this. And so he just went back and forth, and friends were trying to help him and encourage him. And just a week or so after the funeral for his wife and child, he was in a room at a college, and the drapes had been closed, and a friend of his was with him. And Tommy Dorsey's sitting at a piano, and he hasn't played any music since the funeral. He's just sitting there, staring at the piano. And then all of a sudden, there's a little ray of light that's coming through these closed curtains. And then all of a sudden, as his own words, he said, I started to browse over the keys of the piano. And he wrote these words: Precious Lord, take my hand. Lead me on, help me stand. I am tired, I am weak, I am worn. Through the storm and through the night, lead me on to the light. Take my hand, precious Lord. Lead me home. Now, Tommy Dorsey didn't know how the Lord was going to work through all this stuff. But he put his faith in God. And he continued to serve the Lord in very special ways. We may not know how the Lord is going to work through various situations in our lives. But please understand, God will work through the situations in our lives. We need to hold on to his hand. He is our Lord. And let me close with saying, you are somebody in God's eyes. You are somebody in this life, and you have great value. You are important. The things you say are important. The things you do are important. Your contribution to society is important. You're important to each other. You are important to God, and you are somebody because you are God's masterpiece. There's a poem that says, I am somebody. I may be poor, but I am somebody. I may be young, but I am somebody. I may be small. I may have made mistakes, but I'm somebody. My clothes may be different. My face may be different. My hair may be different, but I am somebody. I may be black, brown, white. I may speak a different language, but I must be respected, protected, never rejected. Why? Because I'm God's child. Who are we? We're a chosen people. We're a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession, so that we can declare the praises of him who called us out of darkness into this wonderful, marvelous life of light. We're God's child.